Welcome to SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. It's Tuesday, March 17th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. March Madness is here, and on today's show, Star columnist Vahe Gregorian will break down how Kansas and Missouri are set up for the big dance. The bad news for those of us that want to watch both is their first-round games tip off within a half hour of each other on Friday. But first, we're talking Chiefs and some new faces through trades and free agency. There was a big move on Monday as the Chiefs acquired a player they hope doesn't play, or at least doesn't play much at all. Beat writer Pete Sweeney will explain. And I'll have some final thoughts and tell you what's on my radar in Kansas City sports this week. Hello, Pete.
Hello, how are you?
Good. So what is this? Chiefs sign a guy and hopefully he doesn't play. What's the big news in Chiefs free agency this week?
Yeah, it's been an interesting offseason so far. We have been wondering what the Chiefs would look like for 2026, and I think what has stood out to me, Blair, is just how different the defense is going to look. A lot of these names that you saw from the 2022 NFL draft have moved on to new teams. And so it's going to look a lot different. Chris Jones will be there. Nick Bolton will be there. But really the supporting cast will seemingly feel entirely different. But the big news on Monday was actually on the other side of the ball. The Chiefs made a trade to acquire their backup quarterback for 2026, sending a next year's draft, 2027, sixth-round pick to the New York Jets in exchange for Justin Fields. And as part of the agreement, New York, just trying to shed Fields, has reportedly agreed to pay $7 of the $10 million due to Fields. So it's only a $3 million cap hit for the Chiefs. And they get a capable backup with more than 50 starts to his name. And it probably is more important than ever that they got someone like this, just considering Patrick Mahomes and rehabbing from that torn ACL and LCL he suffered in December. If Fields never plays a game with Mahomes driving to week one, his role is more important in this offseason than it would have been otherwise, because without Mahomes, you need someone to run the voluntary workouts, the offseason program, throwing to guys, while they're in the facility, mandatory mini camp. We don't know at what point, we think training camp. We don't know at what point Mahomes is actually going to be on the field at training camp. And so I think having a quarterback, similar skill set where there is that dual threat ability. Obviously for Fields, it's been more running than passing, but both of those things exist for him. And so you would think that when Mahomes is ready, whenever that is, he will be in good shape because the offense will be used to the same types of plays that Andy Reid would run with him.
And Justin Fields becomes the fifth different backup in 5 years for the Chiefs. That's quite a revolving door, right? If I got this right, we got Chad Henne, followed by Blaine Gabbert, Carson Wentz, Gardner Minshew, and now Justin Fields.
And don't forget that cup of coffee for the high school coach Matt Moore in the original championship season as well.
Right. He won a game for the Chiefs.
To beat a playoff team. I think it was the Vikings. It's been, I think, evolving, right? Like at the beginning of his career, you saw Andy Reid go with an older quarterback. Now Mahomes himself is sort of middle-aged in terms of quarterback age. And so going a little bit younger, we saw that with Gardner Minshew. I also think, like from the other side of it, Blair, these quarterbacks that still maybe want to start one day, I think Minshew was in that camp. I don't think he feels completely done. They come to Kansas City for a year and you're under Mahomes, you're under the tutelage of Reid. It did work out where Minshew was going to get, it looked like 3 starts at the end of the year to show what he could do. And he suffered his own knee injury. And then, you don't want to go so in on a player, but to me, Chris Oladokun and Shane Buechele proved untenable, in the brief time we got to see them. And so they needed to go get someone who can run an offense. And I always say this, like in a backup, let's say a quarterback has to miss 2 games, 4 games. You got to go 2-2 or 1-1, right? Like win half the games, don't sink this ship. And I think the Chiefs are eyeing a beginning of the season where maybe they won't have Mahomes for 2 to 4 games. And I think of all the backups that were out there, like I was looking at a similar type of player. Like I had mentioned Tyrod Taylor, like that was very intriguing to me. Justin Fields is a similar player in that dual threat type of guy. And I do think that they could win 2 games if he had to play 4. You just can't go 0-2, 0-4. You know, we've seen with the Cincinnati Bengals years and years where it just becomes too big of a hole. And so I think this scratches an itch for a lot of reasons. Chiefs get a capable backup. I think Fields will really enjoy a year in Kansas City, even if he doesn't start one single game. I think there's a lot to be learned from Andy Reid. And we also saw Reid do this with a future Super Bowl champion and Nick Foles. And Nick Foles went on that wild run with the Eagles after being here in Kansas City behind Alex Smith. He ended up getting a really nice contract out of it. Didn't really pan out for him, but to say that, you know, you were able to move on and win a playoff tournament and get a ring, you know, that's a wild success. And so, yeah, I like the move for a lot of reasons. And I think the most beautiful part for like the diehard fans that are always so concerned about the Chiefs salary cap is it doesn't seem like it's going to cost them that much at all.
You mentioned he's been a starter. His record is 16-37 as a starting quarterback. 3 years with the Bears, a year in Pittsburgh, and then one in with the New York Jets. The Jets last year in Pittsburgh, he went 4-2 as the starter. So, and in his, I'm trying to find the positives here for his career numbers. His second year in Chicago, he rushed for 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns. He was top 10 in the MVP voting that year.
Yeah, and I think you can't deny the raw talent. I mean, that's why he went, I think it was top 11. I think he went 11th overall.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the NFL and probably under talked about is coaching. I always throw out the hypothetical, what would Patrick Mahomes have been in Buffalo, in New Orleans? I don't think it would be the same type of player. I mean, I think the part of the Mahomes magic is that he meshes so well with Andy Reid. So I'm intrigued to see what Justin Fields will look like both in training camp and the preseason games. I also think there's a bonus to him as well, Blair, in the sense of he's a very unique skilled set type of backup. You could have packages in the red zone, like we saw with Rashee Rice, where it's just direct snap, and he's uber athletic. Like I think this is a player that could see handfuls of snaps in real games, just depending on if Andy Reid feels like it's time to run one of his special plays.
Well, that'll be interesting to see. That'll make St. Joe interesting. See where we see Fields lining up and when.
And who knows? Like, just to add to that St. Joe point, I kind of mentioned it, but he might be running the show for most of St. Joe, right? Like, we don't really know. I mean, they left a huge window. Rick Burkholder, the head trainer, athletic trainer for KC, I think he said between 7 and 11 months. They're aiming for 9, which would get you back by that early September to start. But I mean, it could be Fields at least for the first week or two of training camp running the first team offense. So I think we'll get to see a lot of Fields. Yeah.
Pete, we haven't talked. Pete Sweeney's with us, Chiefs beat writer. We haven't talked since the Chiefs have made several other free agent signings. The defensive tackle, nose tackle, Kairos Tonga, cornerback. Help me pronounce. Is it Kader Kohu?
That's right, and Alohi Gilman, the safety as well.
Right. And the running back, Amari
DiMarcado.
Right.
Some pronunciation guide additions on
yes.
on this
stuff. Always going to need help. So, of those, any you like more than others, or make more sense than others? What were the Chiefs doing here?
Well, I think in Tonga, they had seen enough, right? They brought back Dirk Notty. They ended up bringing back Mike Pennell. And I think they wanted to get an impact player in the defensive interior, which theoretically will help your edge rush players. And so I think now you have that big run stuffing body that'll be next to Chris Jones, and you don't have to go back to the well and bring back these players that have probably played, their best snaps. Their best snaps for you are probably behind them. Gilman was very interesting to me. I went right to the snap counts to see where he lined up. I mean, it is almost near identical to Brian Cook, and Brian Cook left to go back home. He's from Cincinnati, went to Cincinnati, and is now a Bengal. And so you needed to get a player that could just come right in. And I liked meeting Gilman the other day. Seems like he's going to be a fierce competitor. Will be a good quote for us, Blair, which is really all that matters. Kohu missed a year last year, and it's a slot player for KC. Was a rising player before tearing his own ACL in training camp last season. To me, that's more of a depth move. DeMarcado is just a reaffirm of really changing shape of the Chiefs running back room. You have Ken Walker, who's going to be your grinder. DeMarcado looks to me like he could be third down, change of pace, home run hitting type of back. Hasn't really gotten many snaps in his career, but his yards per attempt is staggering, 6.5. So, maybe he's this fresh player who can come off the bench and do something for you on third down. Some of those types of packages. Looks like he has that dual threat ability as well. And then you round it out with Brashard Smith. And so, for years and years, Blair, it felt like the running back room to an extent was this revolving door. And then they went back. I talked about bringing back Noddy. They brought back Kareem Hunt. And I think they finally were like, okay, we need to get better in these areas. Certainly the defensive interior, and then the running back room. I do look at the defensive back room, and I mentioned you lost Cook. Your starting cornerbacks from last year are now members of the Los Angeles Rams. And so, I think we came into this offseason being like, what are the Chiefs' greatest needs? Kind of thinking that maybe they would get Watson back. And I think as you've sort of looked at the whole picture, defensive back has become a lingering need. I mean, you're going to have to draft, and I imagine they will now that they have 9 picks. I think you see 2 or 3 cornerbacks drafted, and much like they did in 2022, you're throwing a lot of numbers at a position, hoping that your scouting department is finding these day 2 and day 3 players. Because I'm not sure they would still take a cornerback in the first round, even though they do have the 2 picks. But also you're buying into Dave Merritt, and why not? I mean, Dave Merritt has been so good for this team. They're so lucky that he has decided to stay local to watch his son play college ball, and that's been holding him off from becoming a defensive coordinator. But he could have been a defensive coordinator probably 2-3 years ago. And so you'll see them throw numbers at that cornerback position, and we'll see if Merritt, we talk about the Mahomes magic, the Merritt magic can work its way into some capable starters and some capable depth players in the secondary.
Absolutely. So yeah, I was going to ask you what the moves of the last 2 weeks have meant as for the draft and in future free agent signings, but I think the secondary and wide receiver are now groups of interest, position groups of interest, high interest for the Chiefs.
And I still think edge is a need as well.
For sure.
I like Karlaftis, and I like Gelati, and I think you might have something there. But you look at these top 2 edge players that everyone says in the NFL draft. We wrote them up from the combine. Sam and I did. Bain and Bailey. They're just not the type of players size-wise that typically goes with Steve Spagnuolo. And so the more I begin to look at that top 10 pick and just the needs that you mentioned, wide receiver stands out. And like when you look at across the league at these top wide receivers, or even, it might be considered a number 2 or number 3, man, the Colts handing Alec Pierce that lucrative contract. Like, I don't know if you can get a real capable number 2 legit wide receiver, potential with number 1 upside without taking someone that high. So I'm on receiver. I was probably before free agency. Now I feel like I'm there even more, that they've addressed running back. They're not going to go get Jeremiah Love now that they have Ken Walker in the building. You've seen them address the defensive interior, as we talked about. They have a replacement at safety for Brian Cook. So yeah, I like wide receiver with the top pick. I probably like edge player that is maybe more of a fit for Steve Spagnuolo in that 29 range. I don't think them going up a few spots to get someone they like at that number is off the table now that they have been able to stockpile picks. And so maybe they get an edge player that they feel is a fit. And then the rest of the draft, I think, you're looking at offensive line. I think you need some tackle depth. We mentioned that, they need to throw a few darts at cornerback. I also think this is quite obviously the final season of Travis Kelce. Does tight end enter the fold, at some point where maybe you're able to take a guy with measurables that you like? Remember, Travis Kelce should have been a first-round pick, but he wasn't. Some of that was with some of that off-the-field stuff in college. Maybe you could find another diamond in the rough at the tight end position. But the Chiefs every year, and I've said it on previous podcasts and local radio and such, they do a really nice job of having capable starters at every position. And I think, the moves that they have made have done that. And, at least to an extent, throughout the draft, they can go with best player available. Except for, like as we mentioned, just considering everything that comes along with Rashee Rice, and we don't need to get into that today, but I do think wide receiver feels especially needy, at least for me right now.
It's been fun watching all these pieces start to come together, and of course the draft is the last major puzzle piece for these guys. Okay, great conversation as always with Pete Sweeney. Pete, we will do it again soon, and we're going to take a break. When we come back, Vahe Gregorian will talk NCAA Tournament. It is March Madness, the big dance, the NCAA Tournament. It's a fun time of year, and I can't think of anybody I'd rather talk to more about this than Vahe Gregorian. Hello, Vahe.
Blair, it's good to be with you. And I seem to remember back in the Jurassic era of sort of social media efforts that we did a video on Selection Sunday night once, and it seemed to go viral for some reason. Or maybe it just caught a virus. I'm not sure. It was one of those, but I'm always glad to get to talk to you right about now.
I remember that. We were in the old Star building and carrying on about the Selection Sunday and the bracket, and couldn't help ourselves. We went on and on and on. And you're right.
Nabobs.
Right. We ended up with more viewers than maybe anything we'd ever done, and we still can't explain it. So.
I certainly can't.
So what do you remember? You remember your first NCAA tournament? How far back do you go going?
Yeah. What's weird is my first NCAA tournament was the NCAA final at Kemper Arena in 1988. Just the final, because a friend called me in St. Louis that day. He'd gotten a ticket and said, if you want to drive over. And I like, all right, I drove over, and I was just telling some other longtime associates of ours about this the other day. I'll never forget the feeling of kind of walking through the portal in Kemper Arena and just coming into this enchanted land, seeing all the coaches sitting together in the stands, seeing all the media, which, moves our hearts, of course, assembled on their seats. And then there was the game. But that was the game that, of course, it was Kansas and Oklahoma. It was 50-50 at halftime. And so it was about a year or so later that I covered the tournament for the first time with the Post-Dispatch.
Mine was my first game was in 1973. My dad drove my little brother and I from Raleigh to Charlotte to watch Providence beat Maryland in the East Regional Final in the old Charlotte Coliseum. Ernie DiGregorio and Marvin Barnes beating Tom McMillan and Len Elmore.
Yeah.
And John Lucas, who, by the way, has a connection to something we're going to talk about here in a moment. But that was the first one I ever attended in person. And you're right. It felt different. It was magical.
Yeah, same for me. And you should know, of course, that Ernie D in our household, well, at least when I would think about him and talk about him, was, of course, Ernie D. Gregorian, not D. Gregorio. I mean, we needed some ownership, but those were, yeah. And I always loved that you got to get started on this so young. I was a little later in my life to get to that. I mean, my college basketball early days started with my alma mater, Penn, being in the Final Four in 1979, right as I was about to become a freshman, and of course, getting to see it through the Palestra. But anyway, that's back then.
Well, and as I said, there's a little bit of connection between the game I saw back in 1973 and this one, in that John Lucas, I believe, if not that year, it was the next year that he started his career at Maryland. His son is Jai Lucas, who is, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I hope I am, of Miami, of Florida, which will play Missouri in the first round. Am I pronouncing it right? Do you know?
I heard Dennis Gates say Jay.
Okay, Jay Lucas.
I'm really not sure. I guess we'll learn it by the time I ask him a question on Thursday. Or it might just be, hey, coach.
But that's the matchup. The 10th seeded Tigers against number 7 Miami of Florida. in St. Louis. I tell you, the Tigers got something of a kiss, didn't they, with their seating and their location?
Listen, Blair, I really think they did, and not to put too fine a touch on this, but all indications were Missouri was most likely to be an 11 seed and head to Dayton. And I'm basing that on certain data points, a lot of what sort of most pundits that we respect have, and of course the magical land that you took me to with Bracket Matrix, which puts together 129, I think is what it was up to, mock brackets, and the overwhelming number were Missouri is an 11 seed, and it did seem likely that would mean they'd be in Dayton. So A, they don't have to go 48 hours after the bracket to Dayton. B, they're going to St. Louis. This is a home court advantage against a better seed. And, maybe it won't be that dramatic that way. I'm not sure the Missouri fan base is going to be the most notable fan base in St. Louis, with Kentucky and Iowa State playing there as well. But I tell you what, that's a double bonus for Missouri to have this opportunity. And it just feels like this is a moment the Tigers really have to take advantage of, especially because they've had such little NCAA tournament success for really a long period of time now. Just one NCAA tournament win since 2010. And I think for Dennis Gates to get some real traction in the program, a win is significant here. And what better way to have it than getting the extra energy of doing it in front of your fan base?
That one victory that you mentioned is by Dennis Gates. It happened a couple of years ago against Utah State. And he has taken the Tigers now to 3 NCAA tournaments in his 4 years. Now, the one year he didn't, it was such a terrible year. That was the winless SEC season for the Tigers. But 3-4, that's excellent. However, Missouri's not coming into this event on a roll. Just kind of the opposite, right?
Yeah, that's right. And they lost 3 in a row coming into this, and they're tough opponents. And, shoot, the Arkansas game was in overtime, could have gone the other way. And there's been some thin margins that Missouri's benefited from and not been able to handle. That's been a little bit of the story of its season. But, Missouri did beat Florida, a number 1 seed, defending national champ. And that's a couple months ago now. But it does tell you a little bit of the baseline, I think, that for what Missouri could do. Now, to your point about 3 NCAA tournaments in 4 years, that's a little bit of the same feeling to me. Feels like a foundation, but Missouri has had a ceiling on it still during that time. And I think that would be what Tiger fans, and I think, the national outlook on Missouri would need to see change for the program to be, sort of back in a mix that during a 25, 30-year period we were used to seeing.
Quick little scout on Miami, the most improved team in the country this year. They were 7-24 a year ago. Lucas at the helm. They're 25-8 right now. Their associate head coach is Cy Young, who was on the Missouri staff for each of the past 3 years.
Yeah, that's interesting too. There's some connectivity with this. Dennis Gates emphasized a couple of those things on the Zoom call last night. So they're close. And it's one step removed with Dennis Gates' most significant mentor, Leonard Hamilton. But Leonard Hamilton, of course, used to coach Miami before Florida State. And Dennis said he owed Leonard a return phone call last night. I don't know that he'll have insights on this particular team, but it's a little bit of 6 degrees of separation in college basketball in general. I mean, it's kind of amazing how often you can assume certain connections, and that's kind of part of the fun of it.
The winner of this game gets, in all likelihood, Purdue, the number 2 seed. So would be a great day, great Sunday in St. Louis if we could get Mizzou and Purdue knocking heads.
It would be. And then picture this, Blair. I think the real dream scenario for any fan who's got tickets for Sunday would also be Iowa State, Kentucky.
Yep.
in that. And that, of course, remains to be seen if both of those teams would advance. But that would be, I mean, really two of the most animated fan bases you'll ever see that love to travel. I feel lucky to have gotten a hotel room in St. Louis because that was the first act after seeing what was going on. Better get that locked down.
Kansas at least got one victory in the Big 12 tournament here in Kansas City, beating a good TCU team, a team that's in the 8-9 game opposite of Duke in the East. But the loss that eliminated Kansas in Kansas City was just hideous. Was 20-point loss or so to Houston. Great Houston team, by the way, 2 seed in the South. But it was just an awful loss, and doesn't. If you're a Kansas fan, I'm not sure your heart is full of hope going into this NCAA tournament, especially with a potential second round game against St. John's, the Big East tournament champion. Kansas is the 4 seed. They play California Baptist on Friday night. By the way, just I'm not happy with the tournament schedulers to have Missouri tip off at 9:10 on Friday and Kansas at 8:45. So they're right on top of each other, except for a couple of TV timeout periods. But there we are.
Yeah, no, I mean, first of all, this is always about us, and I can't believe they're messing with us that way. And second of all, they're messing with us just by being late. I mean,
Yes.
Those games take on a totally different tone, and more seriously, not really just for us, but that is a lot to ask for teams to wait around all day. And it's for both teams. It's not like, one team has an advantage over another, but it's just kind of an unfortunate aspect of the tournament. Now, for a lot of fans, that's great. It gives you a chance to stretch out the day. I thought when you were going to say that about the placement for Kansas, you were going to refer to also the location, which it really is. It's about 100 miles, I think, from Cal Baptist campus, and that's a little strange to be a 4 seed and to be a 4 seed and not have it protected. I think the tournament committee tries to go at least through the 4 seed and say you're not going to be disadvantaged in the first round, and that's about as good as it can get because of so many different competing criteria to get the bracket done. But it feels a little funny for that to be, Kansas to have that, and certainly feels a little funny for Missouri to have a home court advantage against the better seed. One last thought, Blair, just while I'm rambling, is you do wonder that, I mean, the nature of that loss to Houston, it's one thing if you lose by 8 or 10. It's another thing if you're sort of putting up the white flag 15 minutes left in the game. And that's kind of what happened. I mean, it was whatever, a 24-point lead with 15 minutes left. And I thought that was a strange testimony about this Kansas team. And I think I have this number right. It's just off the top of my head. I think they've lost 5 of their last 9.
That's right. Yeah.
And those are the games. That's the longest, I think, consecutive streak that Darren Peterson, the gifted freshman who has been, only fleetingly available, or I shouldn't say fleetingly, but not always available. That's the longest streak I think he's had. Certainly it's the longest streak he's had playing in the mid to high 30s, 30 minutes a game. So what you hoped might kick in for Kansas was, they're gelling because Peterson's there all the time, and they found themselves. That is really not proven to be the case.
No, it hasn't been. And in that Houston game, they had a stretch of 17 straight misses. That's stunning, right? And of course, Bryson Tiller, the big guy, got benched. Bill Self took his frustrations out on him, and just didn't like the aggressiveness with which he was playing, and put him on the bench.
It was strange, Blair, because we had for a little inside baseball, as they say. We somehow commandeered a box upstairs. Blair Kirchhoff, Vahe Gregorian, Sam McDowell, and our friend Dennis Dodd, and so we were in there, kind of able to talk more than we normally would during the game. And after we caught on that it was 12 misses in a row, we were actually kind of with wonder counting along as it kept happening. It was just I don't remember ever seeing that many misses by a team like that in a row.
It would be great to see Kansas get out of the first weekend, but that hasn't happened since 2022, the year of the national championship team. So tough road for Kansas to play, as you said, a local team. Cal Baptist is in Riverside, and the Jayhawks are in San Diego, and then Rick Pitino in St. John's. How about four coaches with a national championship in this region, the East region? One of them's not Duke. Even more interesting. So
Yeah, that is interesting. And as we were getting ready for this, I got thinking about which of these regions really feels the most wide open. And it's funny because I really like the number one seeds, but I see all kinds of potential for some chicanery through through it. And it seems anyway that that it's the Midwest that feels the most open, with Michigan as the number one seed, and Iowa State number two, and well, all four. That Virginia's had its moments, and I guess it's Alabama at the 4 seed. There's a lot of room for not a lot of margin for error, and a lot of room for some developments, I think, there. And anyway, there's just a lot to digest, and I would urge anybody listening to look over Blair's region by region capsules, which Blair, I wasn't sure you were going to have time to get to them all yesterday, but I thought they were pretty informative.
Well, I picked a winner in each one, and I have Arizona winning the national championship. A couple other things I'm going to look for as the tournament unfolds. You mentioned Iowa State. That they're going to be fun to watch, and we were so impressed with them, of course, in Kansas City. But Nebraska, looking for its first NCAA tournament victory ever. They're the only power conference team that does not have an NCAA tournament win. And then a couple of area high school kids, Bennett Sturts at Iowa, the Liberty player who made it with Drake last year, and his coach Ben McCollum now with Iowa. They're in an 8-9 game against Clemson. Illinois with Keaton Wagler, the Shawnee Mission Northwest player. Illinois is a 3 seed and looks pretty good. Those are a couple I'm keeping an eye on.
Yeah, same here. I was fortunate to see Wagler play in person in that game against Missouri, the 91-48 Illinois win over Missouri months and months ago.
Yes.
A whole different year. But boy, he was something else. And I think Illinois is an intriguing team too. And it is, I know you've for many years really followed Nebraska closely through the Big 8 years and everything, and been pretty cognizant of that true oddity in Nebraska sports history. I'd like to see that for the Huskers, and then look, maybe once that lid comes off, they can get a little momentum going.
Absolutely. Okay, great conversation as always with Vahe Gregorian. Have fun at the NCAA tournament this week. We'll be back after this. I'll share some final thoughts and tell you what's on my radar in Kansas City sports. It seems like we say this quite often, but these are busy times in Kansas City sports. Basketball continues with the NCAA tournament and also at the small college level. The NAIA National Tournament begins in Kansas City on Thursday with the championship game set for the following Tuesday, March 24th. The tournament was established in 1937 with the help of the game's inventor, James Naismith, to crown the champion of smaller schools. Except for a 7-year run, it's always been played in Kansas City. The women's basketball teams from Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri did not make the NCAA tournament, but they're all part of the WBIT, the Women's Basketball Invitational Tournament. Games start on Thursday and will be played on campus sites through the semifinals and championship game, which are set for Wichita. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC staff of Gabriella Lacey, Suzanne Hogan, and Irvin Zhang, and our editors Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.